Okay, we should be set.
Okay. All right. Uh-oh. Hold on. I'm sorry. It just kicked me out for some reason. That was weird.
We can see you.
No, I mean of my email.
Oh.
One minute, guys. So sorry. That was weird. That's never happened before. Okay, now it's back. All right. Pursuant to House Bill 5002 and Utah Code annotated sections 52.4, 207.4a and b, whereas I am the presiding officer, chair at all meetings of this public body, whereas the Utah Code annotated section 52.4101, the Open and Public Meetings Act, governs the conduct of this public body, whereas the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act amendments provide that a public body may convene and conduct an electronic meeting without an anchor location if the chair of the public body, A, makes a written determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location, or B, states in the written determination described in subsection 4A the facts upon which the determination is based. Whereas in the previous written determinations I made from August through December 2020 and again in January 2021 through June 2021, I stated the facts regarding COVID-19 and transmission, and I incorporate those prior written determinations here. Whereas the facts contained in the prior written determinations remain true, including the facts that the state of Utah remains under a state of public health emergency, Grand County is in a high level of transmission, and the meetings of this public body do require attendance by individuals at higher risk of severe illness from COVID-19. And the CDC indicates that the lowest risk for events and gatherings is virtual only. Whereas the health and safety of city officials, employees, staff, and members of the public is best served by holding electronic meetings of this public body. Whereas this public body has prepared for and demonstrated the ability to effectively conduct its public meetings electronically, including providing members of the public means to observe the meetings and provide comments electronically. Now, therefore, I conclude that conducting meetings with an anchor location that is physically accessible for members of the public to attend in person presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination will expire 30 days after the day upon which I've made the determination. It is possible that circumstances could warrant future determinations, and so I may reissue future written determinations at that time. There we go.
Hey. Thank you.
It had been a while. I was getting fancy to read that again. Okay, great. With that said, I call this meeting, July 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission to order at 6:05 p.m. Already did the written determination to conduct electronic meetings. And next on the agenda is citizens to be heard.
Kaya?
Yeah.
This isn't really a citizens to be heard, but we don't really have a category on the agenda, but I wanted you all to meet.
Oh, I was going to do that after citizens to be heard.
Okay.
Before we get all that out of the way. Just wanted to see if we had anyone waiting first, so.
We don't have anyone waiting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Summer. Thanks, Nora. Yes, that being said, tonight in attendance, we have Kai Marienfeld, Planning Commissioner, Luke Wojciechowski, Ruben Villapando-Salas, John Knight, and our new commissioner, Britton Ballard. Britton, welcome. We're really excited to have you. Do you want to say anything? Now's your opportunity.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the Planning Commission. This is a great opportunity. Yeah. Hi.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Britton. We're really excited to have you. That means we have a full slate of planning commissioners now, which is very exciting. It's been a while. But yeah, this is awesome. We're really happy to have you. So welcome. Feel free to ask questions, hop in, anything like that. If we were in person, it'd be far less formal. So I'm trying to keep that vibe when we're on Zoom. I think we all know how to operate Zoom. So, okay, great. Next agenda item, the approval of minutes. We have several minutes to approve. We have the May 27th, June 10th, and July 8th meeting minutes for this year. Has anyone had a chance to review them? If so, would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes? We'll entertain those now. Any corrections or additions? Okay, well, I was at, I think, all of those meetings except June 10th. I can't speak to that one,
You can
but
still make a motion.
yeah. I will still move to approve the meeting minutes from May 27th, June 10th, and July 8th, 2021. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, got a second. Summer, whenever you're ready. So Britton, we do a roll call vote when we're on Zoom just to make it easy for Summer to record everything. So she'll call your name out and then you can say aye or nay or abstain.
Luke.
Look,
Did I freeze?
Luke froze.
Uh-oh. Okay,
I'm
we'll
back.
move on.
I think I'm back.
Oh, yeah.
He's back.
But aye.
John,
Aye.
Ruben. And I'm not sure, Ruben looked like he was struggling with the audio. Oh, he's got his hand raised.
Okay, good.
Kaya,
Aye.
Britton.
Aye.
Okay, all minutes approved unanimously. I forgot about the little hand raise function. That's useful.
Yeah, it is.
It was very helpful in this instance.
Good job, Ruben. Okay, we have a few action items tonight. We have first action item 5.1. This is new. This is consideration and possible approval of draft Planning Commission Resolution 05-2021, a resolution amending the City of Moab Planning Commission bylaws to allow electronic participation. Also, kudos to Corey and Summer and Nora for getting this cranked out in a couple weeks. So yeah, whoever's presenting, take it away.
That would be me. This is a change to the bylaws, which would make the Planning Commission's bylaws and the City Council's rules and procedures consistent. And what it does, it allows for somebody to call in from a remote location if they need to meetings, and you can go ahead and vote and be a participating member. This is not the resolution that says we can have Zoom meetings forever, because we really want to try to start holding them in person. But if you're away and you have the opportunity to call in, this resolution would allow you to do that. We are working on the technology to get the technology figured out to make sure it works right. And we're pretty darn close. So hopefully by our next meeting, if someone has to participate remotely, then we could probably accommodate it. It's best to be in City Hall if you're in town. But, we all have those rare occasions where we have to be somewhere else, but we have time and we have access to a computer so we can participate. So that's what this is about. And I also just included all the bylaws just so that you can look at them and remind yourself about just sort of the function of the Planning Commission. I gave Britton the bylaws and the rules and procedures and the code sections that give the Planning Commission the authority. So she has all that. So all this would do is just modify the bylaws to allow for that electronic participation. And it wasn't too much work because Lori just sent me the language she did for the City Council and I just changed it. So it's really Lori's, it's to Lori's credit. She had already drafted it for City Council. So we're basically the same language. Questions, comments?
Yeah, thanks, Nora. Any questions from anyone or any comments?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. We're happy you're here, Ruben.
Me too.
in your Sherwin-Williams paint catalog as per usual. I like it.
It's true value. What are you talking?
Okay, that's better. Local. All right. A quick question, Nora. Is there any sort of, and I'm looking at it right now, was there any discussion about a limit on the number of times that someone could participate
No.
remotely?
There isn't, unless you want to add that.
I mean, I don't think so unless it becomes an issue.
Problem.
I'm
Yeah.
really just focused on getting people to participate in meetings however is easiest for them at this point. So
I agree. I'm not sure we have the capability to do 2 people, but maybe
Oh.
we would. So I know we can do 1. I'm not sure we can do 2, but we're working toward that goal. We're
Okay.
redoing sound stuff. So
We can do multiple on the phone.
okay. So that's good. So, you know, if it's you need to give notice essentially. I think
because Summer needs to
takeaway. Yeah.
coordinate with Summer and everything.
Yeah.
So let me know, and then I will. I'll let Summer know, and we'll figure that out.
Yes, that sounds good. Great. All that said, so just as a reminder for all commissioners and our new commissioner, in your packet, there are links if you're looking at the digital one. Typically, the first item is the agenda summary, and that also includes a potential motion for approval. It also includes whatever the options might be. So tonight we can approve this resolution with or without modifications. We could table it if we had a specific reason with direction to city staff, if it was something from an applicant, and direction to the applicant about additional information. So it's kind of a good intro. So there is a proposed motion for approval if anyone would like to make that. Now is the time.
I move to approve Planning Commission Resolution 05-2021, a resolution amending the City of Moab Planning Commission bylaws to allow electronic participation.
All right, we have a motion. Any seconds?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we take a vote? All right, whenever you're ready, Summer.
John?
Aye. Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Britton?
Aye.
Kaya?
Aye.
Ruben?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. We can now participate electronically on a regular basis if need be. But again, like Nora said, if at all possible, it's obviously the easiest and the most ideal, particularly for city staff who are already here long after their typical work day, if we attend in person when we can. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. Okay, on to our next item. My computer is spazzing out, sorry. Discussion item, a continued work session on possible changes to code provisions governing accessory dwelling units. Just a little background, our last meeting was an official meeting because we didn't have quorum, but we did have a really good discussion, Luke and John and I, about the potential changes to our code regarding ADUs. So hopefully we can get a little update on that and continue. Thanks, staff.
All right, if we're ready to get into it, I can share screen with the presentation that we had last time along with the additional notes we'll have here. If you do hear some background noise, we've got a little spectator here that I'm babysitting, so there might be some baby crying here in a minute.
Not babysitting when it's your kid.
I was just gonna say
My
that
boy.
child.
My
You're
boy.
babysitting, you're parenting, Corey.
Well, yeah.
Also, please hold your child up so we can see him.
He's adorable. Anyway.
All righty. Okay, so we'll quickly, this, as you can see from the date, this is just that presentation. Hopefully Ruben and Britton had a chance to review this. It's like nods of yes. So we'll just quickly move through this presentation and into what was included with the agenda summary, which is the notes of where that discussion had taken us. So within this presentation, we looked into the background of what the House Bill 82, Utah state legislation modifications to that family housing modifications bill were, and how those effects are coming into our municipal code, as well as the discussion about additional amendments we might want to make to our external ADU code. So right now it's just a single ADU code that we have, and the House bill is affecting those that would be internal. We don't have a designation for separate ADUs at this point, but moved into revisions and updates to further remove regulatory barriers, looking into some of the general standards, including setback, size, number of ADUs, deed restrictions, and then now into our notes of what that discussion included. So on the topic of front yard setbacks for ADUs, shall be at least equal to the plane of the front wall of the principal structure. The question was, should we consider eliminating this and allow ADUs in the front yard as long as they meet the code required setback? The general consensus of the commission during that was in favor of this change. ADUs should be allowed in the front of the primary structure as long as they meet the underlying setback. An example of what that language might look like is pretty simple, like we show there. An accessory dwelling may be constructed above a garage and consist of the same floor area, provided that it should not be protruding beyond any ground floor wall, or should not consist of more than one story above the ground floor. The overall structure shall not exceed 20 feet in height. Should the allowed height be more than 20 feet, it is difficult to have a garage and an ADU above and meet the building height of 20 feet and conform with the pitched roof standard. That being the question to the current code section, the consensus was in favor of some adjustment. Discussion included changing the static height requirement to 30 or to 25 to accommodate that pitched roof requirement and align with the underlying zone height requirements. The concept of height in relation to setbacks came up, and really that discussion of the multiple strategy areas really got broken down into three basic areas. One was really evaluating height to setbacks, and then the next conversation turned into size of an ADU with the number of ADUs. So we bundled those strategies, and then there was, of course, the deed restriction comment. But where we landed on that was the concept of having a tiered setback height requirement. An example of that would be a 20-foot height for a accessory dwelling, whether it was on its own or above a garage, 5 feet from the side and rear setback, which is consistent with our accessory dwelling, or excuse me, our accessory structures. And then a 30-foot height for any structures that would meet the underlying zone, whether it was on a garage or not. What we'd be looking into, and the request from the commission, was to look at what those two code provisions might look like. One being the decreased setback with the maintained height, just keeping the height where it is and just decreasing the setback, which seemed to address most of what the concerns coming in from current ADU builders are. The height isn't quite as limiting as the setbacks, is what that number one would really address. Number two is making it a more accommodating and dynamic language description for both height and setbacks. So that's what that came down to. And again, like we were mentioning, the size of an ADU, looking at, is 1,000 square feet too small? Do we need to increase that size of a maximum? And again, the consensus was in favor of some adjustment to this. And again, just kind of getting into the meat of it, that what at the time we had found was many people coming in saying they weren't able to find a affordable product, whether that was modular or, to some degree stick built, that made sense for them, but mostly modular. They couldn't find modulars that were under 1,000 square feet that made it work for an ADU. So they were suggesting, if it were just a little larger, if it was 1,100 or 1,200, even into 1,500. We'll get into this a little bit later, but what we've done since that conversation was research what products are available in a modular size. And it turns out that at this point, and maybe during the original feedback we were getting from citizens was a little dated, because now it seems there are a great number and continuing number of modular and manufactured home production companies that are producing modular homes anywhere from 240 and then a great variety within that 800 to 900 range, and then even some into the 1200. And really where this discussion might take us is, when does it cease to become an ADU, and when does it just start becoming a second dwelling unit, a full home with the size? All right, and then that last component that we had talked about was the deed restrictions. Where we had landed on that was in favor of including the no subdivision of land for an ADU in the deed restriction, which is consistent with the internal with the state and what the current ADU criteria includes. It just doesn't include it in the deed restriction. So that was an easy accommodation. What we did find was not in favor of including the owner occupation requirement for external ADUs. Again, the discussion that we had last time was essentially under the yield of, well, we'd rather get an ADU than even if it is a second home builder, we'd rather get an ADU out of it than say, no, you have to be local and then you get an ADU. So it's more of an incentive based versus allowing the product to be placed, even if the consequence is having a second home. And then that second component was townhomes and twin homes. Should we allow ADUs permitted on twin homes and townhomes? We found that we are in favor of external ADUs on a twin home, which is consistent with our current policy of what we do now, if of course it meets the criteria and requirements. And what the commission found at the time of the conversation is that we were in favor of permitting external ADUs on townhome lots if the parameters of the external ADU can be met within the individual townhome lot. Those including setbacks, open space, parking, fire separation, on and on, but would not necessarily be applicable on a commonly owned or maintained lot area of a townhome lot. So that's with the types of townhome platting that there are some that allow for individual ownership of land outside of just the townhome structure. And then there are some that what we're discussing as wrapping around the townhome. And then the rest of the parcel is common area. Sorry, got a dog and a baby. I'm so sorry. And then that an ADU would not be applicable in the commonly owned space. So after discussing that concept with Nora a little bit in the last couple of weeks, that it, as this moves to council, it's likely that though we're in favor of that potentially, would likely not be something that would be included in these amendments to the code because of what that might result on. And we can get into that a little bit further after the presentation. So from here, what I've included is a series of images sourced from Studio Shed, Colorado Building Systems, and at the end I credit them. I want to make sure I give credit to everybody I'm sampling their concepts from. But these are floor plans and concept images showing really what that looks like. When we're talking about these square footages of ADUs, it's easy to kind of get lost in either trying to minimize and really say, let's pack the doors and fit as small as you can go, or maybe losing track of what 1,500 square feet actually looks like. So starting from smallest to largest, this is 224 square feet, this being the 14 by 16 image, and this might not even be exactly accurate. This might be the 14 by 20 image. It's just being shown as the 14 by 16, but quite small. I mean, literally a shed. This next one's pretty close, but 320. And this floor plan showing really how condensed of a unit that would be at 320. In the previous discussions, we talked about 375, typically kind of being the smallest the building official is able to make work within the building code. This outline, it might work this way, to be able to be shown this way. A couple of these units, I think this one in particular, had been proposed in Moab at one point. early on. They never did follow through with it at the property as employee units, but a neat concept. And then going a little bit larger, 416, bedroom area, closet, bathroom, great room with a kitchen. So not bad. These are starting to get into what you might see more in the manufactured floor plan side, but still being modular. 480, a little bit more room, storage room here. So an expansion on what that really small studio unit might have been, but staying pretty sleek. And then just starting to grow from here. 650, 2-bedroom. And this is where you're going to start seeing larger studio units or smaller 2-bedroom units. And that's where that division starts to happen. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 840 square feet. Getting a little bit bigger. And then here is actually a separate, it's almost a duplex situation, but it could be accommodated essentially into one if you thought about it, but the front door would be here for one, here for another. So this isn't exactly applicable for an ADU, but just again, off of square footage. 960 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, larger storage unit. 1,000 square feet. And so this is 1,008. So when people were coming in, they were proposing things like this. It's 1,010, it's 1,050, where it is in excess of that 1,000 square feet. But yet it's still really only supplying room for what could potentially be an ADU. 2 bedrooms is we're starting to break into a full dwelling unit at this size. So 1,200. Oh, hold on, everybody, just 1 second. Okay. 1288.
Your baby's got quite the growl, Corey.
Isn't that right? He's something else. So now we're into 3 bedrooms. So getting to that 288 is, condensed, but yet 3 bedroom. So you're getting to the larger family. And then finally up into 1320 is, potential 2-story stack system with an add-on garage option. And then credit, of course, to Studio Shed, Steel Box, and Colorado Building Systems. The more cabin modulars were that Colorado Building Systems. Steel Box is those that were very modern looking, and then Studio Shed was that very original one. Steel Box is the one that had been proposed in Moab before for employee housing. So that was really meant to give you some scope. We burned through it really quick of where that square footage is actually going when we're looking at making this maximum, if we do want to adjust the maximum, of what the transition would be from what the mechanism of an ADU is. What are we trying to address? And that was one of the topics of conversation this past discussion, was which solutions are we trying to solve? Because we got almost 2 juxtaposed comments of, we don't want to encourage, well, maybe that's not the right way of saying it, but larger family units. And then one was saying we do want larger family units. And that was in the size to number of ADUs discussions where we got into that of what we are trying to encourage. But with ADUs, really the element is that it should, in theory, remain an accessory or an auxiliary unit of the primary, rather than just increasing density, which is something we can do, but that should be reserved potentially for what the solutions we'd find in amendments to the density code in the R3 or R4. Rather than trying to make ADUs fit all the boxes. So I'll leave it at that and maybe open up for discussion.
Yeah, let me say a couple things. So this afternoon, kind of late this afternoon, I sent you all a memo that I prepared for the city council for them to consider next week. And it goes through a whole range of ideas and options for trying to deal with our really critical employee housing issue. And some of the ideas are real short-term things, some of them are longer-term things. The ADU is just one little piece of the puzzle. So we're not looking at the ADU to solve the whole problem. An ADU, the kind of the rationale behind it is that if there is an owner in the main house and there's a small ADU in the back, that person won't really become a nuisance because the property owner lives there too. So if there's any shenanigans, the property owner has to deal with it, and they're the neighbors. There's a little bit of a concern, I think, if you've got a second home, there's not anybody there who can keep the ADU person in line, if you will. But it's not, that's sort of the original concept, or a mother-in-law or family member. I personally have lived in 4 of these over the years. And they fill a really important gap for young people, which is how the first 2 were, and the second 2 were people with empty nesters. So it really is a good tool for really affordable housing. But what we don't want to do is necessarily like double the density, and so that we have what looks like twice as many houses. And I think when we are getting into 2 bedrooms and 3 bedroom units, we're looking at more than 1 or 2 cars, and it really becomes just a house, right? And right now we generally allow 1 house per lot, although that's debatable as well. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of that background information about the owner occupied thing and about the size. So and just put in perspective that the ADU is one piece of the bigger picture. Thanks, Corey, for doing a great presentation.
Thanks to the both of you. That was very good. And I had some comments about it. I just wanted to say first, I am in favor of owner occupation. I think that that's a pretty good step, especially as far as incentivizing locals to start building ADUs and start working towards it, rather than other people buying homes and then starting this project, making money from both ends. I think that's a big push that we should be giving people. This kind of goes out of the realms of ADUs, like you said, but like Luke suggested, 1,200, 1,500 square feet in the last meeting. And looking at some of the models that you put, I just ballpark estimated 1,350 square feet. And if we did more than 1 ADU, maybe 3, because that still splits it between 450 square feet each. And that's something that I would be okay with seeing.
So you would base it, there's total square footage, but it could be divided into multiple units.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure. I don't know if that will fly or not, having multiple ADUs. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our existing neighborhoods are fairly dense already. And we want to have more doors and be able to reach more income levels. But I also don't think we want to turn a residential lot into like 4 ADUs in a main home, because that gets into commercial property almost. So I think it's a little bit tricky, and we can talk through it. And the next step in my eyes, and thank you for your input, Ruben, I know you probably have more, but in my eyes, based upon the input that we get tonight, we may discuss it briefly with the city council. Probably not Tuesday, but maybe. But we'll probably run something past them to see if we're even on the right track. I don't want to go too far off if they just say no, that's not a strategy that we want to consider.
I'll have to throw all my note cards away after that.
No.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben, for watching last meeting.
That's really
awesome to get caught up. Thank you for taking that time. I know it's hard to find that.
Go ahead, Ruben, continue.
Well, and I was going to say, and so that's another tricky issue that we're dealing with. There was a comment about how it's a little tricky to do percentage based, right? And is that just a matter of actually putting into code, or the people who are, or staff is going to have to deal with that? It's a bit of a nuance. or nuisance.
Yeah. So there's some language in there that says so much of the backyard has to be continued, some percentage has to continue to be open space. And we don't, I mean, we have some capability to look at a lot and kind of measure it and see what the total is and then what 25% would be or whatever. It's just, we don't have an easy tool to determine that. We certainly can ask the applicant to do that. And in some cases, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to, but a lot of these are property owners that we're seeing now are property owners who have lived here a long time. And they just want to put a little thing in the backyard. And so we're trying to make it as simple as possible. Not that the percentage open space is a bad thing. I think it's good, but in terms of, we need to relook at that and see if that's the right number or whatever.
Yeah, so whether we do, and 3 ADUs does feel like a stretch, especially when you have houses that have massive yards and then some that are just a tiny little alley on the side, because it just doesn't fit that way, aside from actually dealing with the setbacks. But even like 2 ADUs doesn't feel like it's pushing it. 3 starts to push it, definitely. But I would like to see more than just 1.
Okay.
I think it varies so significantly from property to property, which is why we have the setbacks. Those are going to be consistent regardless of what the property is. And then you also have the IBC requirements, the International Building Code requirements, which sort of are the lower end of everything. So at least now, my way of thinking about it is I do like the idea of just having a maximum amount of square footage and then whatever configuration that ends up being, whether that's 1 unit or 1 structure, I should say, or 2 structures or 3 or whatever the property, because there are some really, really large lots with a lot of space. And I do think that it's nice almost to encourage the construction of ADUs in that more open space rather than subdivision in certain instances, because when you're constructing ADUs, you're providing something that's still owner owned, instead of peeling it off and potentially just having another developer buy the parcel and build something that's out of the price range of locals kind of using that existing structure, whereas they could always subdivide it, right? But we're giving them an incentive to provide more housing without having to subdivide and then have no more control over that property.
Right.
I am not in favor of the owner occupation requirement. I just think there are too many variables that cause people to need to move in their life to point A, point B. I was personally disappointed with the county's decision to require the local ownership provision on the HDHO in the county, because I do think that made it infeasible for some people's situations. And I think it was lower income people, unfortunately. I understand the intent. I totally understand the intent. I just think our code is already pretty unfriendly right now to things like this. And so I'd like to maybe open it to see if it's even something that folks bite on before we're adding a restriction on top of that. At least if it were me, might make it a little less attractive to do with my property.
Yeah.
I still think it absolutely still fills the void that we need to fill, even if the owner doesn't live in the main structure or one of the ADUs.
So one of the things that I talked about in that memo, and you guys probably haven't had time to read it yet, but there are a lot of other things that may provide other ways to provide those doors, and even for a real temporary home situation. And one of those could be figuring out our code so that we can do like a tiny home village, or lots with multiple tiny homes that somebody would have to manage, obviously. But and our code right now doesn't really allow that except as apartments, and then the density is really restricted. So we are talking about that to try to get that in the mix as well. And we're also, I don't know, I mean, in terms of homelessness, there's certainly some even less expensive models for just basic shelter. And it may be someday that we'd be able to have a campus with sort of a range of shelters, so that people can move sort of from one into the next step, and then hopefully toward more permanent residential. But I think those are all things that we need to look at in addition to this.
Is the owner occupancy restriction something that you're committed to proposing to council when you're having these discussions with them? Or is that something that, like, absent them bringing it up, wouldn't necessarily be something that'd be presented? I'm just curious sort of what the temperature for that is with staff and then potentially with city council.
I personally think it's a good idea, just because I've been one of those people. And, I knew that the owners were living right there, so I couldn't act up. This is
She was a raver.
not so much a problem anymore, but, back then. But that doesn't, if the planning commission feels like they want to make a recommendation that doesn't require that, that's fine. We can go that way.
How would the enforcement of that work? Would it just be when you construct it, it has to be owner occupied? How could you possibly enforce that down the road?
The same way we enforce everything on a complaint basis, mostly. So somebody would find out something. I mean, it's not something that if there's a tenant in an ADU that's causing a big ruckus in the neighborhood and the owner isn't there, then we certainly would probably find out about it, and then we could enforce if we were to put that in.
So my view on the owner occupied, obviously mine comes from the developer perspective. I've seen what the high density overlay requirements have done in the county, and it's killed multiple projects from moving forward. And I think that it's a great idea to have the owner occupancy requirement. If you want to get doors quick, allow developers to buy these properties, the people that have the capital to build these projects. I mean, an ADU is still not cheap to build. You're looking at over $100,000 to put one in. And I just think it's too restrictive to have that owner occupancy requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, sorry, my brain is going on this.
I understand completely.
Yeah, I just feel like
We can do a year-long.
I'm a homeowner, and if I were to construct an ADU, that means I could never rent my house out because I have an ADU.
Well, you're not supposed to rent your house out anyway, except for.
You probably wouldn't.
What do you mean? Like, yeah, like I could absolutely long-term rental my house at any time.
Yeah.
But this would say that I couldn't do that.
You'd have to live there. Yes.
Yeah, I don't like that for that reason.
Yeah, and the problem that it's created with the county is the issue around financing. So if you are a bank and you're looking at loaning someone money to buy a home, you greatly reduce the marketability of that home in the future by putting that owner occupancy requirement in there. So a lot of banks are not financing these homes and the HDA issue associated with it, because from their perspective, whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter. From their perspective, they're saying, well, Moab's only a community of 6,000 or 7,000 full-time residents. That's essentially the market now, instead of the market being 1 million potential buyers. So now, if this asset gets underwater and we have to foreclose on it, we can't foreclose on it because we're not owner occupied, and then we have to go and resell it. So it just creates a lot of these just lending issues and just, in my mind, just restrictions on rights of land issues that I really struggle with it.
Yeah, and I totally understand what you're saying, and we kind of have to offset that a little bit by maintaining some similar neighborhood character. So those are really kind of some of the trade-offs, but I totally understand what you guys are saying.
I'm assuming there's no way to like institute some sort of requirement that if the owner isn't living in the community, that like the property needs to be managed by a local property management company.
That's possible. That is something that's possible. If we want to go that way.
It just seems like this is something we want to do to allow locals to make use of their existing property that they own to provide housing for other members of the community. But it's adding this odd burden that, like, for me, that would be reason enough not to do it. Like, and I'm someone who will like literally go to any length to create extra housing in this community at all costs.
Right.
And that would say, oh, well, it's taking away my ability if I need to move for my job to rent out my house to someone else or multiple people long term.
Yeah.
That honestly seems like it's like kind of having the opposite effect in a way of providing more rental units, which we super desperately need. And I understand why you're doing it, and I understand likely where city council will be coming from, but that seems to me, I'm having flashbacks to like the pad and like shooting ourselves in the foot with making this infeasible. Like, it looks great on paper, but who's going to do this for that reason?
Right. And those are really valid points.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is more a question or comment, but isn't that already happening in this community? I'm pretty sure there are units where the owners do not live that have ADUs, that have people in them. You know, I know of places where this is happening, where the owners are not living there, and there's renters in the back in an ADU and renters in the house. So,
yeah, it happens, and those would be basically grandfathered in. So it would have to be for new folks if we decide to go that way, which we don't have to. But yeah, I'm sure there are examples. We also have an awful lot of illegal duplexes, which has created more doors, but they don't meet the zoning, and it puts us in a really tight spot. So, you know, we're going to ask the city council to kind of look at that. Maybe if these units have been there for a certain period of time and they meet building code requirements, maybe that's okay. And we sort of grandfather them in. Because we don't want everybody to go in and start ripping out their second units, which we actually had to do on one property, which I hated to do, but given the language in our current code, I had to. They didn't have the land area to add the extra density. So, but we're going to be looking at code changes, hopefully that, well, or policy. And I think we need to talk about that as part of the process as well.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's tons of information. It's really good that we're doing something. I'm curious to get city council's perspective on it, for sure.
Bit of an off comment, but I like seeing on the Facebook pages where they're talking about like, how do you prove that you're a real local? You know, name one of the places, you know, the oldest place that you remember, which is like Alco or Hoagie Yogi in my case. And it's like this, I wish that we could just take the TRT tax and just give it to all the locals and say you have 6 months to build ADUs, but that's, that would be nice.
It would be nice. And some of the options that I've laid out for the council involves, you know, potential purchase of a lot that we can do a tiny home village in partnership with somebody, or buying a house that's for sale and then being able to rent out the rooms individually for those folks that need emergency shelter or short-term shelter. So we are talking about some things that require money right now that we don't have. So I think eventually that would be a great goal. And the other thing that we are talking about doing is trying to kind of develop some model homes. Salt Lake City has done this, so that it's easier for somebody to just come in and kind of take it off the shelf, and they know it's engineered and it'll work. So that goes with all of this eventually.
Hey, Nora, can you do, like, I think it's great that the city wants to get involved in that, but this goes back to my private enterprise views of like the city should not be competing against private developers. Like the Walnut Lane thing, I've always not agreed with, but the city can partner with private enterprise to make things happen. So are there things that we can do, like tax abatements to incentivize these sorts of things, or like,
Well, we could.
or hey developer, we bought the land, lease the land from us for 50
Right.
years at 50 grand a year or something.
Yeah.
Different things like that.
I think the council needs to look at those things. I really do. And I think eventually we'll get there. But we are just really, really underfunded right now, quite frankly. And we can't even buy office supplies without getting permission. Our budget is very, very tight.
And that's why I was thinking, like, what can we do to incentivize the developer? Because I can tell you, the developers in our community are chomping at the bit
I know.
to make this happen.
Right.
It's just more profitable for them to build more nightly rentals right now. But if we could figure out the density requirements or incentives or something,
Right.
more profitable, shift their effort to multifamily, then
Yeah.
that's what they'll do.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to get at with some of the other changes that we're looking at, recommending. Definitely.
I want to like not start over the pad, but just like really look at it like we just have to. That I think that's the answer. That's the Johns and the Beckys and the me's and the Mary Ann's and the U's and everybody, from every perspective on housing and development, was on board with the idea of giving incentives to private developers if they provide affordable housing that is deed restricted in some way, which I think is unfortunately just what we have to do, because we don't have a local market. We have a market that includes everyone in the entire world who wants to buy a second home. So unfortunately, like the market controls don't always work. But if we could come back to the table on the pad and figure out a way to actually make that more attractive to a developer, I would love to do that.
Especially in the R2.
Not the density thing, for
The
sure.
last minute, they took out the R2 as an eligible zone to use the pad. And I think that's where it's most useful, because in the R3, you can do apartments. You can already do them, and then the density is already really high for Moab. So where we really need it is in the R2, saying you don't always have to build just a single family or duplex. You can build more units, but it has to be, there has to be an affordability component to it.
I will say that the density is high in R3, but if you recall the property that I had, Nora, that I wanted to do that apartment building, and it wasn't dense enough to allow for it. So instead, more trailers went in, which not cool of a project.
Well, it's 20 units per acre, 20.7 units per acre is what the R3 is. And in most cases, what we found is that, there he is. Look at him, little Mr. Redhead.
Perfect.
You get him to growl again?
Yeah, I think he'll growl. Anyway, what was I saying?
We got distracted by the baby. This is Corey's like grand political strategy. It's like, it's getting heated.
Bring the baby out. No, the density. That's what we were talking about.
R3.
What we found is that most people that are trying to plan like a pad, where they ran into the issue was with parking. The lots aren't big enough to be able to provide even the R3 density the way it is now without the pad and still provide parking. Parking is something we definitely need to address.
Parking is,
in my opinion, we require too much parking, but the city council, again, at the last minute when they were adopting the pad, upped the parking requirement. So we need to change the pad to deal with parking for sure. And then as far as the density goes, we will have a really big discussion about all that.
Yes.
To come. I mean, I've already run a bunch of numbers. Kaylin is really interested in it.
Good.
So, we've already started some of the thinking behind all that.
That's great. And we'll have a few different city council members come this fall too, who might have some different perspectives than
Exactly.
former council did. So
Yep. That is so true.
I'm all for it. Let's do it. No, the parking thing, the anecdotes I've heard about parking limiting really good, cool things that the city would appreciate and love makes me so sad.
We're controlled by the car. Drives me nuts.
Yeah, and we're not, and I said this when I first moved to Utah years and years ago. It's like our streets are 15 miles wide already. Like it's not like we're gonna,
Yeah, and we're so car centric.
yeah,
Ridiculous. But
there's
anyway,
plenty of room for cars. Okay, awesome. Thank you all for a really good discussion on that. Thank you, Nora and Corey, for getting that. And I'm excited to hear what council says. And maybe this is a time where we can start to have those like one-on-one, like council to commissioner conversations again too. It
might be worth doing a joint work session.
Yeah.
Or I think that would be a good thing to do. So they're getting this memo. They got this memo, and we're having this meeting on Tuesday. And then after that, we need to deal with next steps. And maybe one of the next steps is to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission. And then we probably have another one in another month or two when we've done some more work, just to kind of keep checking in. I think that's a really important thing. Otherwise, our city council tends to want to go through the whole process again, just them. And as much as we can share ideas and have joint sessions, I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. And it's been a long time since we've had a joint session. So, okay, awesome. Thank you all. I'm excited to see. Next item, future agenda items.
Well, Corey, we've got the hospital that's going to be coming up. They're building a new building and then an addition, and we're working with them. It takes a long time because they have a huge decision-making organization. So when we meet with them, they're like 6 people, and it's a little clunky, and things aren't happening real fast, but we're trying to help them through the process. What else? Oh, we have the ward, which is now called
The Atlas
the
Apartments.
Atlas, which is Ben Bird's project at the old hospital building. What he wants to do is, and he's made application. I'm just waiting for more information. So like I think it's 8 new townhome units on the edge of the property that he would build first to help finance the rest of the property, which he's looking to do in a redevelopment, partial demolition and redevelopment, and trying to use as much of the building as he can. And his goal would be to try to make them as affordable as possible. So that will be coming up. Like I said, we have received an application, but we still need a bunch more information from him. Mr. Rubin?
I don't really want to get too off topic, but I was just thinking about the owner occupation. And I was thinking we could push owner occupation, but if a developer doesn't want to live in the house, then they can build stained glass.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good
That's just a simple trade-off that adds to it.
Absolutely.
Ruben, if you ever run for local office, I really want your signs to be like stained glass style.
I really need to pull them out, but I have a couple of concepts out of like arches in Castleton. So
that's awesome. That's super. I like it.
We'll do something with it.
I told Britton about your stained glass window fixation.
Oh, and she loved it. Did she tell you?
Yes, of course.
I do. I also want to still claim title to youngest planning commissioner. Kaya said something about Britton being younger than me. That's not the case.
Okay, now we know.
Very nice. I love it. All these Gen Z.
Yeah, it's great. I'm so glad.
Zoom in on Zoom.
Got the rest of us like cranky millennials here too. So.
And I'm a boomer, so I go way back.
Okay, boomer. Anything else on the? on the agenda. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you all for showing up. I'm really excited. I think having a full commission is really going to help with our just attendance woes we've had this year. But really appreciate you all. Meetings are every second and fourth Thursday of the month. Write them down.
So, Kaya, I had a conversation with the mayor, and she is fully aware of who attends and who does not attend.
Okay.
And there is, there are a couple members that didn't respond tonight, even whether they were coming or not, and we need to rein that in. So both of us can work on that.
I've been taking attendance all year.
Yeah, we do too, because you get paid, so we have to,
Yeah.
Go to the meetings. But yeah, just a heads up.
Yeah, I hope we can excuse me from. I was in Montana for the last 3 weeks, and so I made sure that I watched the video. I was a part of it.
Which is awesome. It's really more just letting people know in advance so we don't go up thinking we have a quorum and not have a quorum that just looks really bad on the city and is rude. It's rude to the developer.
Your attendance has been stellar. It really has. I mean, we all made a meeting, missed a meeting. I was not at the last meeting because I had a family thing. So it happens.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of not letting us know and making a habit of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And same with, with John having to be gone for coaching, like there's things that come up. It's just let the staff know really is the biggest thing.
Right. And Luke is also a star in terms of attendance. And Kaya.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all so much. And welcome again, Britton. We're really psyched to have you. Okay. That being said, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:03 p.m. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.